and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very, very high above all the puerile and pedantic forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming.
Which is not as high as you were yesterday.
Well, that's true. Very, very, very true. Welcome to the program, my friends. It is happy Wednesday. I've been back in the saddle again. And, you know, every time I take some time off of the program, I really try to put the phone away, put the laptop away, get away from it all. And it never seems to work. Ever. It's always like I'm on something. I'm trying to figure out a new story. I'm trying to move the program ahead, and then what do I find? More phone calls.
Do you realize what you just said?
I do.
You're on something.
I heard
can
that.
See the headline.
I know. Iverson admits that he's on something. Yeah, whatever. I've got a headline for him to print. But anyway, I had a great time over in Jackson. We spent Memorial Day weekend with some friends over there. And went and saw John Michael Montgomery. He still throws a pretty good concert. Not exactly my speed of music, but the lovely Christine really enjoyed it. So it was a great weekend. And I've got some updates for you here in just a little bit. But I think I want to start out the program with, if you don't toot your own horn, Ken, nobody else is going to do it for you. So over the weekend... FeedSpot released its list of the 100 best conservative podcasts, or the 100 best conservative podcasts worth listening to in 2025. And throw my screen up there for a minute, Ken. Ah, yes, here we go. Now, what's fascinating about this list are the names that are on it. And, the first one, the Matt Walsh Show. I don't know if you ever listened to Matt Walsh. He's incredibly funny. Of course, there's Ted Cruz, Charlie Kirk, Allie Beth Stuckey. Yeah, she's on the Blaze.
You can stop right there.
Yeah, right there.
There's enough.
That's enough. What about Michael Knowles, Steve Dace?
Ellie Beth got him hands down.
Yeah, I'm sure. I really
Steve
like
Dace
her.
is funny looking.
He is. So is Mark Levin. Yep. But down here at number 36, I realize we're kind of down there a ways, but 36, there it is, Cowboy State Politics.
Hey, congratulations. Casey Kasem would be very proud of you. You're top 40.
I made the top 40. So anyway, number 36 on FeedSpot's top 100 podcasts. I never thought I would get here, and quite frankly, I'm the only reason that Cowboy State Politics is even anywhere close to this list is you. Thank you very, very much for listening to the show. I couldn't have done it without you, and frankly, without you, there'd be no reason to do what I'm doing anyway. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your support.
There is one more person to whom
My favorite sandwich in grade school, you don't think?
That's true. We couldn't have done it without Nancy Case either. And thank you to the very generous sponsors of Cowboy State Politics, the Honor Wyoming, Morton Buildings, the Buffalo Wool Company, Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. Let's see here. Who else? Oh, yes, the U.S. Coin Capital, the Wyoming Cartridge Company. The list is long and distinguished. And thank you very much for listening to the show and supporting the show. And I really couldn't do it without you. So anyway, thank you. And by the way, I'm probably going to keep referring to this because I don't know that there's any other Wyoming podcasts that are on the list. I really don't even think they're anywhere close. So anyway, congratulations to me. Now, over the weekend, like I've told you, I had a great time in the People's Republic of Jackson, and one of the coolest things happened. I met this older gentleman there, a friend of a friend, and well, I guess I should preface it this way by saying that being a complete history nerd, I get like super excited when I can touch pieces of history. So I'm meeting this gentleman, and a really nice guy, and we're walking through his house, and he says something like, do you like history? And the friend I was with, she says, well, David has a degree in American history. And he says, go look on that table over there. And let's see here. Hold on here. Let me show you from the current slide. There it is. So go ahead and throw this up, Ken. So I see this tea set on the bureau in the hallway. And it's really hard to see, but on the shorter of the two is stamped 1776. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, crap. Holy moly, I can't believe what I'm looking at. Well, this tea set was owned by the Marquis de Lafayette. Absolutely, this tea set was sitting on a table between the Marquis and George Washington. And I'm telling you, my friends, I got full body chills looking at these two pieces, holding them. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. Also, another thing that, here we go. Another thing that was on his wall is the original painting of the USS Wyoming. This is the original. It's the only one that exists. And a cool story about the USS Wyoming.
Wasn't that the largest wooden ship ever?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At 450 feet, the USS Wyoming was the largest steamship that was ever built. And the story behind it is that a bunch of Wyoming ranchers got together and they wanted a ship. And so the entire thing was built out of pine. Now, I don't know, Agent 29, you're a carpenter. How sturdy is pine?
It's a little questionable. In fact, I'm kind of a nautical buff myself, and so I had done some research into the Wyoming. It was a freighter, and they used it for hauling cattle and other such things. But the thing would flex tremendously as it was going through, and I think actually at one point it broke.
In
and that
half.
was at the end. Yeah.
Yep, it broke in half.
Yeah.
And I've got just a little piece I pulled off the net this morning just to read you a little bit of history from the USS Wyoming. But it was an American wooden 6-masted schooner that was built and completed in 1909. It measured at 450 feet, so it was the largest known wooden ship ever built. Because of its extreme length and wood construction, the Wyoming tended to flex in heavy seas, which would cause the long planks, which were made of pine, to twist and buckle, thereby allowing seawater to intrude into the hold. Wyoming had to use pumps to keep its hold relatively free of water, and in March of 1924, it floundered in heavy seas and sank with all hands on deck. And the funny part about it is this wasn't sponsored by the state of Wyoming. It was a bunch of rich ranchers that decided to build this thing.
That's true, and its history is really pretty fascinating because it came out, was used for a while, and then was fairly rapidly decommissioned with issues. And anyway, the other thing had to do with it came along very late in the age of sail.
Yeah,
and then they were all of a sudden they needed more freighters, and they put it back into service. If you're interested, it's a pretty fascinating story.
Yeah, totally fascinating. Well, on the way back, we stopped at the U.S. Military Museum in Du Bois.
military vehicle museum. And if you've not been there, folks, you need to take a couple of days.
It's
Especially
pretty cool.
if you have a military background, you must go.
Well, the only reason the lovely Christine and I stopped there was to get a gift for her parents. And I was telling them that, hey, I just got to hold the tea set owned by the Marquis de Lafayette. And I'm like, I don't know if that really beats your gun. And he says, well, why don't you stick your head around the corner and go look at the gun? Now, this showing on the screen right now is the musket that fired the first shot at Bunker Hill. The shot heard round the world. And they've got the provenance of this rifle to say that they're fairly certain that this is the rifle from Bunker Hill.
It's kept in a rather secure location. Isn't that cool? When
the vault door is huge.
You walk in the front door and there's this giant vault and everything, and then they'll let you go in there and look at it. And there are other things in there, as you can see from that picture. But
yeah, I mean, it's we didn't have time to even poke around in the museum at all. It's we were on our way home and we just stopped there to get a gift, and because I was on my history high from the Marquis de Lafayette, I was like, well, yeah, I got to go see the gun that fired the first shot during the Revolutionary War. But interestingly enough, though, I was telling Christine that some historians think that the first shot was at the Boston Massacre. And I don't really know that I agree with that, because that was a skirmish that happened. It was in the street between, the colonists and some British regulars, and it did go to trial. The British soldiers were defended by John Adams, and he actually got them acquitted, by the way. But so I don't really know that was the first shot fired. Interestingly enough, though, the reason you probably don't know who fired that shot is the guy was black. It was Crispus Attucks who touched off his musket there in the streets of Boston. But anyway, so the rifle from the Bunker Hill, super cool. I mean, it was a history parade for Dave during Memorial Day weekend. Oh, and by the way, if you didn't listen to the Memorial Day special on the podcast, I encourage you to go back and listen to it. I got a lot of attaboys for it. I think it did a really good job. So it's available on the podcast. Oh, and by the way, we will have a podcast today. It is Wednesday. I can only take so much time off. But anyway, back in the saddle. And when we come back from the break, we're going to get caught up on the news. Apparently, we've got a new attorney general, or at least interim attorney general. I've got some thoughts on him and a whole bunch of other stuff in just a second.
U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time, and now a member of the 100 podcast that you need to listen to in 2025. It's so good to be back at work. You know, I mean, when you take a vacation, you get to a point where you're just like, I want to go home and get back to normal.
Yeah, I think instead of 100, you should say top 40.
I think I should say top 40. Yeah, and I mean, it sounds much more prestigious. Maybe we need a soundbite of Casey Kasem and America's Top 40. Well, over the break, over the weekend, over Memorial Day, however you want to put it, Governor Mark Gordon appointed an interim attorney general, and this guy's name is Ryan Schellhaus. And I don't really know that much about him, except that he's just another lawyer that already worked in the attorney general's office. Let me just read to you what Gordon's press release says. That, quote, Schellhaus joined the Wyoming Attorney General's office in 2003 and has served as Chief Deputy Attorney General since 2019. He previously spent more than a decade in the civil division of the Attorney General's office, including both deputy and section supervisor, blah, blah, blah. So he's just another one of the insiders that Gordon has appointed to be Attorney General.
Yeah, he went there in, I think it said 2003.
Yeah.
So 20 plus years. Yeah, more of the same. More
of the same, total insider. I don't think that you should expect anything different coming out of the Attorney General's office. But it's interesting that he was appointed interim Attorney General. I don't know why he wouldn't just straight up appoint him the Attorney General. Maybe he's looking at something else. I have no idea. But anyway, Ryan Schellhaus is the interim Attorney General. Yay! I don't see any reason to give him any applause whatsoever. So, that's become your favorite soundbite. Anyway, so in national news, of course, the Jim Comey thing continued to percolate through the media. This is a piece from the Daily Wire, and it's entitled, James Comey Calls GOP the White Supremacist Adjacent Club. And I quote, former FBI Director James Comey called the Republican Party the white supremacist adjacent on PMS-NBC. Comey was interviewed over the weekend by PMS-NBC host and former Biden White House press secretary Circleback Jen Psaki. Quote, one of the things that is happening now is that the Trump administration, of course, is testing the system in ways it hasn't been tested before, Psaki claimed. In the law enforcement sense, do you think there are laws that should be put in place that would help better manage this? Aren't they in place now? I mean, aren't we equipped? Is the law enforcement system and the legal system equipped to deal with what we're seeing now? And here's this idiot, James Comey. Here's what he says. Quote, probably there could be changes at the margins, but in the main, we have the tools. There are the cultural impediments that are to doing this work, Comey answered. Let's say you work in the FBI and you know that there's that one of the two political parties is, let me put it nicely, white supremacist adjacent at a minimum. And so why wouldn't you want to throw your career on that side of the line? And come on, this guy was the director of the FBI. I know that we all sat through it, but think about this. The top cop in the United States, well, right directly below the Attorney General, is the guy that falsified FISA warrants, that sent undercover agents, well, I guess they weren't undercover, but they sent agents to the White House under questionable circumstances to try to catch the Trump administration. This guy's been a political actor his entire career. And just that he was appointed the director of the FBI should tell you the depth of the deep state in Washington, D.C., that there are so many insiders that really, a lot of them only exist to keep the deep state in power. And by deep state, I mean career level bureaucrats. I know there's a lot of people that throw that term deep state around, but I hardly ever hear a definition of it. But really, what I mean by it is the people who are career bureaucrats who have been in that job for a really long time, and there's no reason to think that they would go anywhere else. And so their main function is to justify their job and to perpetuate their job. And Jim Comey is just another example of that. That he calls the GOP white supremacist. I mean, that's as if you needed any more evidence of who this guy is. That's just more on top of it. So the Democrat Party is in a weird place right now. They're in a weird place in Wyoming. And by the Democrat Party, I mean the Redcoats in Wyoming and the National Democrat Party. They're flailing in the polls. And really they don't even have a backbench. When you think of it, who do they have to run? Gavin Newsom. That guy's a wacko from the left coast. There's no reason to believe that he even has any chance of becoming president. But I mean, he's about the only guy that they've got. There's the fellow over in Pennsylvania. There's maybe Jared Polis in Colorado, though I don't see that any of those guys really have a chance. So the Democrats are trying to create what they're calling an anti-woke alliance. And, words mean things. And when you hear the Democrats come out with a new plan, it's really important to pay attention to the language that they use. In conservative circles, there are a lot of different groups that call themselves anti-woke. Well, the best way to take an argument away from the other side is to co-opt their language. And so that's what their attempt here is, to form an anti-woke alliance. Let's see here. This one is from The Blaze, and I quote, "Anti-Marxists who once stood beside nationalists against the woke left now undermine the alliance with a lie that is designed to divide, humiliate, and discredit their partners. Until recently, woke was a term that anti-Marxist liberals, nationalists, and conservatives had in common. It was a term that we could use to communicate with one another and understand one another in our post-2015 battle against the virulent and ascendant strain of neo-Marxist revolution." There's a lot of words in there, and let's just kind of describe or explain what they mean. So anytime you hear the word neo in front of anything, so neo-conservative, neo-Marxist, neo-liberal, neo means new. And so the implication, I guess, is when you call somebody a neo-Marxist, that's the new Marxist or neo-conservative. Now that one, and this is where these political terms get confused a lot of the times. And it's one of the problems that we have on the right, is that how do you combat these terms? Because we're fighting an enemy, the Democrat Party, that most of their battles are fought with language. They try to convince you of things that are not true simply by adjusting the words. So, for example, the inflation bill, right? The Inflation Reduction Act. Okay, that had nothing to do with inflation, but the reason they called it that is so that you would get behind it and support it. It sounded like something that everybody would get behind. Well, the guys on the left in the Democrat Party, they absolutely knew that it had nothing to do with inflation except to jack it all the way through the roof. So a lot of these words, woke, for instance, neo-Marxist, anti-Marxist. So we need to be really careful that we understand what those words mean, or it's really easy to get it confused.
You know who started the language co-option trend?
Definitely left.
God himself at Babel.
That's a good point.
And
right?
Nobody's done it better since.
Yep, the story of Babel. Let's confuse all the languages. So anyway, the left is trying to co-opt the use of the word woke. It's a pretty big achievement for such a small word. But now a handful of anti-woke liberals have decided to turn this formerly unifying coalition-building term into a weapon to use against the right. True, some of the most malicious liberals have been intentionally using woke right to cover just about the entire nationalist right, whereas other, more naive liberals, having taken the bait, are trying to apply the term woke right only to what used to be called the alt-right, or the white nationalists. So think about those terms, right? Alt-right. Well, the liberals try to use that against any conservative they could possibly find, and you really started seeing it become start ascending after Charlottesville. That every conservative was part of the alt right, so it was an attempt to convince folks that any Republican was one of these white nationalists, and that's why I started with this story from Jim Comey saying that, well, if you're in the GOP, well, you're a white nationalist, because there are a set of terms in the English language that you really don't have to define. So one of my favorite examples in this discussion is the word racist. You can call somebody a racist, and you don't have to have any explanation, any reason behind it. But once you do that, the other person, the person you're calling a racist, is immediately put on the defensive, saying, "Well, no, I'm not a racist. I don't have any." I mean, the burden of proof is on them, and so there are so many negative connotations with those words that it's really easy to cast aspersions on the other side, which is why the Democrats use them. So I get it. I really do. I understand that some of the liberals who've been pumping up the term woke right are deceitful scoundrels, and others are just honestly, nerdishly trying to work out a way of answering real questions in a political theory that bothers them. But for present purposes, it doesn't matter if you're a deceitful scoundrel or an earnest nerd. Every liberal using the term woke right is being a schmuck, so says this author. What we're all doing is taking a flag and a symbol that for 10 years was highly effective at rallying opposition to the neo-Marxist revolution and worked well to cement a coalition that could defeat it, and throwing that flag to the ground and trampling on it so it can't be used anymore. So in other words, think of this in Wyoming terms. Everybody is a conservative now. Now, 10 years ago, if you said that you were a conservative, well, that had some meaning to it, that you were a little bit different than just a Republican, because let's be honest, there are liberal Republicans. I call them redcoats, people who really should be members of the Democrat Party, but because they know that they can't get elected as a Democrat in Wyoming, they call themselves Republicans. So the term conservative was used by many on the right to differentiate themselves between traditional Republicans, that is, liberal redcoats, and folks that actually believe that the Constitution means something and that we ought to stick with our principles. And so those folks on the conservative side ended up leaning on things like the Republican Party platform and say that those are 23 principles that don't change, that all Republicans ought to believe in, but many of them don't, because really they're just Democrats. But the term conservative then got picked up by all of the other folks that are basically redcoats. You see this during the campaign. People who are otherwise Democrats come to your doorstep and they tell you things like, taxes are too high. I love my guns. See, I've got some right here with me. I think killing babies is bad. I'm a conservative, and you should vote for me. And because we're trusting people in Wyoming, we fill in the little circle and we vote for them. And then, of course, they go to Cheyenne and they do exactly the opposite. The best example I saw of this, and I don't know if I'm going to cover this in another podcast or in another program. But there are a number of podcasts that are cropping up on the left that, it's clearly left-leaning people, clearly establishment Republicans, very, very liberal policies, who still claim, well, I am a Reagan conservative. Well, first of all, that's absolutely bullcrap. They're not anywhere close to Reagan, nor are they conservative. But what they're really trying to do is mess with language, to co-opt a term and confuse it to such a degree that it doesn't mean anything. And so that people that actually are conservative, they really can't make that argument anymore. Well, that's what the American Democrat Party is trying to do, is to co-opt the language and confuse it so that it doesn't really mean anything anymore. And they can campaign on those topics and, try to convince you to vote for them. So, it's absolutely incredible. And it's what Democrats do all the time. They lie to you, they cheat, they steal, use language against you. So anyway, more in a minute. are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by God himself. Almost sitting atop the podcast charts in America. Definitely a member of the top 40. Agent 29, that's your task for tonight, is to come up with the Casey Kasem soundbite.
Oh, great.
Here we go. I mean,
I'm going to buy you a bigger hat.
Well, you're going to have to, because it's the one I have is definitely not fitting the size of my head this morning. But come on, man, if you don't toot your own horn, nobody else is going to do it for you.
Well, I'll toot it just a bit. That to me is accomplishment. As you well know, when I started listening to you, the best you could do for a guest.
I was hard up.
I won't even mention her name. But, yeah, you come a long way, baby.
Thank you very much. So before the break, I was trying to tell you, and I don't know if I did a great job or not, but how the Democrats are using language to try to flip the argument, flip the script to convince you to vote for them, because God knows they've tried everything else, and none of that worked. And it's because they've relied on the folks in the Democrat Party that have been there for like 50 years, and they just took for granted the vote of the American public. Their traditional constituencies that they had been relying on for many, many years, and just assumed that they would win. Historically, Republicans did not win the popular vote. And, it wasn't until Trump came along. And I really think that it was a reaction to the disastrous presidency of Joe Biden. And, one thing, and it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or if you're a Republican, but if you want to tick off voters, lie to them, and then make it obvious that you're lying to them.
Well, they say history repeats itself. I listened to Amy Edmonds the other day.
Oh God,
and we'll have more to say about that likely later. But complete revisionist history.
Yes. Glorifying
Ronald Reagan and creating something that didn't exist, a three-legged stool.
Amazing.
I'm going to let it go for now. We'll save it because
too much to talk about.
We need to do some response. Where do you begin with this revisionist history idea? Except the parallels are striking when Jimmy Carter came in and did such a bang-up job.
Oh yeah, he did fantastic, didn't he?
And at the time, I was a senior in high school, and there were 400 some hostages over in Iran. And I stood up and I gave a speech about that in the speech and debate, and was roundly criticized, just like we are today.
Of course.
And Reagan, of course, was vilified and everything else. And now they want to make him like he was this great coalition builder. And yeah, he built the coalition, but not of the Washington insiders.
Exactly right.
And Amy, if you happen to hear this, You are absolutely dead on wrong
Yeah.
about coalition building in Cheyenne.
Well, there's a reason why liberal talk radio and liberal podcasts do not really do that well, with the exception of the guys that are, I think it's called Pod Save America, but it was all of Obama's staffers that created that one. And I mean, to their credit, they've got quite the following. But for generally speaking, and for the most part, liberals don't do that great with talk radio. And the reason for it is that liberal ideas do not work in the real world. Now, if you're an academic sitting up in a big building at some university, sure. I mean, your liberal ideas may work out on paper, but when you introduce them into the real world, it creates poverty and disease and misery. And I mean, that is essentially what liberalism creates, because the only way that you can get things to work, Marxism is, Marxism is the undercurrent behind a lot of what the Democrat Party does. Now, anyway, I mean, I think that to some degree there was definitely some Marxist influences in the Democrat Party, in JFK's day, but not to the degree that we're at right now. And the only way that you can convince people to to vote for you is that if you lie to them. Now, if you think that this whole language thing that I was talking about before the last break is a bunch of hogwash and that it's not real, listen to this. The Democrats are launching a $20 million plan, $20 million, to try to win back young men after calling them toxic for years. And again, I mean, do not take for granted that Republicans are going to continue to win elections. Republicans have this tendency to, once we win an election, we sit back and think, hey, everything's good, man. Big Daddy Trump is in office and he's going to fix everything and we don't really have to do anything. Well, that's not true at all. I mean, that is exactly the opposite thinking that we need to have, because the Democrats, they are masters at manipulating language. They are masters at crafting a lie. And here's another one. Now, just listen to this. And if you think I'm being ridiculous, I've got an interview coming. I don't know. We're probably going to do it later on this week, but with Chris Adamo. Chris Adamo is the author of the book, Rules for Defeating Radicals. And there's a great piece that came up over the weekend in The Blaze. And it's the exact warning that I'm giving to you right now. Do not take your win for granted. Because even though the Democrats are sinking in the polls, make no mistake, they are looking at people like Gavin Newsom and thinking that we could run this guy for president. And here is the only reason why. That, I mean, he's a fairly striking looking guy. He's pretty popular in, liberal circles. And even though his policies have been disastrous, think about it. The Democrats are masters of lying to you and switching language around. So listen to this. This one came to me from The Blaze, and I quote, "The Democrats still don't know why they lost so badly to Donald Trump in 2024, and their attempt to try to figure it out and remedy the situation lies in a new program they're calling," and listen to this title. This should make you laugh. "Speaking with American Men, a Strategic Plan." It's nicknamed SAM, which brings to mind Uncle Sam, or the We Want You World War II military recruitment initiative. We want you. And when you introduce posters like Uncle Sam and he's pointing towards the camera, I want you to join the military, it conjures up ideas of, days gone by when the Democrat Party actually had, a lot of electoral success.
One of the things that bothers me most about the left is everybody has to be shoved into a category.
Yes.
We're going to reach men.
Yep.
We're going to reach Hispanic women, Latinas, or whatever it is. And the first thing they want to do is divide.
Well, that's their entire ethos.
It is. And then the other thing that I would point out here is politics, as you know, is relentless. You alluded to that earlier when you talked about try to have a vacation.
Yeah.
Same thing with me. Phone goes off constantly. There's always something. You can't really get away with it from it. It's relentless. Most of the conservatives, most of the people that I represent, are working class people. Their life is built around what they do for a living.
Yes.
The people that we're up against don't have that kind of a life. They have some sort of a government benefit or something. And this is their life.
Yes.
You see it in Cheyenne. These people that virtually live down there, and they go from testimony to testimony. And we don't realize a lot of times just how intense and how relentless that is. And unless we are diligent to stay in there constantly, we're going to be in big trouble.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Agent 29, you made an excellent point there. But I think I want to unpack it a little bit. You might look at what the Democrats do and say, just like you did, Ken, that the Democrats always have to put everybody into a category. Well, that comes from the very foundation of the neo Democrat Party, if you will, the new Democrat Party. Because this Marxist movement that you're seeing right now, and make no mistake, it is Marxism. There's a great book by Mark Levin, and it's entitled "The Democrat Party Hates America." And there's another one, and I forget the title, but he's talking about Marxism. But everything that you're seeing right now has its roots in Marxism, and let me tell you why. Most of the academics that you see in colleges and universities, and most of them are running our institutions of higher education, came to America from the postmodern school of thought, which originated in Germany. Guys like Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault was a French guy, but anyway, the postmodern way of thinking. And in that is you have to reduce everything to its essential characteristics. You have to deconstruct it. And if you read any of Derrida or Michel Foucault or any of those people, it's an attempt to reduce everything to its essential characteristics. And when it comes down to it, it literally is race, it is your income level, and compare that to Marx's Communist Manifesto, everything for him went down to classicism, where you are in society. So yes, everybody has a category. And when you are stuck in, and I see this on Facebook all the time, a lot of people complaining about, oh, there's billionaires running the country. Okay, well, have you ever worked for a poor person? Have you ever gotten a paycheck from somebody who is dirt poor? The answer to that is no. Maybe it's a good idea to have some people who have built billion-dollar businesses actually run an economy that should be run like a business. But see, the two philosophies, the Republican philosophy and the Democrat philosophy, are entirely at odds, which is why you think that it's so hard for people to come together, because liberals have a completely different worldview than the conservative does. Conservatives, real Republicans, we believe in things like freedom and personal responsibility, and that you get what you put in. That that if you work hard, you will be successful, and nobody's going to give it to you. Right? You have to earn it. On the other side of the coin, the Democrats look at the world in terms of classes. And it doesn't matter if it's a class of rich versus poor, if it's black versus white. Agent 29, you brought it up perfectly, that they try to shove everybody into a category. And so they create these dynamics to where two groups are fighting one another. It is us versus them. And so the Democrat Party, the neo-Marxists, they give you something to fight against. And that's why they become so effective.
And then before we go to a break, the last leg of this is they talk about, as Amy did in her article, coalition building.
Oh, yes.
What they mean by coalition building is you will be assimilated into the government type.
Yes.
You're going to learn to reach across the aisle to get things done, which means we're going to capitulate. That's all that means.
And that's where I'm going next.
Yeah, and the coalition that I'm talking about that is so alien to them is the coalition between grassroots Republicans, conservatives, that actually align with the people that sent them there.
Absolutely. So when you know what, let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk about this whole business of coalition building. I've got a great example to show you what happens with the Democrat Party, and it's nothing that that's going to be foreign to you. You've experienced it by walking up to most restaurants. But we'll be back, and we'll finish this up in just a second. spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia,
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell. Iceland.
France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Obviously, cowboy state politics is only going to continue to expand from every county in this state to every state in this nation. Cowboy state politics. You can listen to the podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Amazon, really anywhere. You can listen to the live program, which most of the time is every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. And you can watch that on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and on X. And I'm going to try to add some other outlets. I've been waiting for Truth Social to put something up, but I haven't seen that yet.
We'll have a chance to do that. The other thing that I look forward to is going to a 2-hour format with the same number of commercials so we can actually have a discussion without constantly interrupting ourselves.
Yeah, well, somebody's got to pay the bills here. This thing doesn't run by itself. You gotta have sponsors. And frankly, there are a ton of people that want to sponsor this program, and I am eternally grateful to all of them. I mean, we couldn't do this without you. And one more time, the sponsors of Cowboy State Politics, Morton Buildings, the Buffalo Wool Company, U.S. Coin Capital, Honor Wyoming, Rebecca Bextel with Compass Real Estate. There've been so many. Wyoming Cartridge Company, the Wing It Food Truck. They haven't been a sponsor for a while, but they were one of my very first sponsors, number 2, actually. And so, I couldn't have done any of this without you. So thank you very much. And it is a great honor to be on that list of the top 100 podcasts. And you know what surprised me more than anything about that is and it still really hasn't hit me yet, but it's the other names that are on that list. Granted, number 1, number 2, number 3. It's just I was blown away when I got that email. So thank you very much to FeedSpot, their panel. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, there are some big names that didn't make it to 36.
Yeah, well, one of them at number 56 or 57 was Scott Jennings. He's a guy on CNN that I play on the show every once in a while. So anyway, very cool honor, and I'm very, very grateful. So before the break, we were talking about how Democrats have to have everybody in a box, and they continually talk about those boxes, building coalitions with them. And that's exactly what they mean when people like Amy Edmonds or the Redcoats or any of them, when they say the word compromise, they don't really mean compromise. To define the word compromise, it's an agreement between two parties where neither party is happy. So I give up something, you give up something, and we make a deal somewhere in the middle. That's not how Democrats and liberals look at the world. What they mean is, well, when you compromise, you do it our way. I had every once in a while I have coffee with a new friend of mine here in Sheridan, and they are very much on the left side of the Republican Party. We do agree on some things. They're definitely pro-life. We've had lots of discussions about that. Kind of pro Second Amendment, though there's a real problem with my new friend doesn't like weapons being openly carried. I don't know what the difference is between being concealed or not. But anyway, when I mentioned, hey, there are some things that we can compromise on, their eyes lit up. And I was like, no, hold on a minute. By compromise, I mean you give up something and I'll give up something and we'll make a deal somewhere in the middle. It's negotiating. When Agent 29 is in the legislature and the House passes a bill and the Senate passes a version of it, then they supposedly go to conference committee. And the whole point is to hammer out a detail that both sides can live with, or hammer out a deal, not a detail, a deal that both sides can live with.
I think that's one of the things that Trump does so well is the art of the deal.
Yeah.
And these people have obviously never read this book. They don't understand his tactics. But he comes out right out of the box with some outlandish goal. This is what I'm going to do. He's doing it with tariffs.
Yeah.
And he puts it up there and they just completely lose it.
Meltdown.
Yeah. And then when they think they've talked him off of the ledge and they get back to something else, it actually ends up being a bit of a compromise.
Yeah.
And we have learned that, we in the Freedom Caucus and some of the conservative folks here in Cheyenne. And so look for us to make some statements that on the outside may seem a little bit outlandish, but look where we end up.
Sure.
One last shot at my dear friend Amy Edmonds.
You are just dying to talk about that.
I listened. It's like a 40-minute thing, and
that's just one of them.
Yeah, I know. I listened to like the first 7 minutes and had 10 pages of notes. But yeah, we'll save that.
Yeah,
we'll save that.
By the way, Amy Edmonds, if you want to come on Cowboy State Politics, though I am reluctant to give you any more air than is absolutely necessary. No, I'm joking. I'm down for a debate. I'm down for the conversation. So if you want to come on Cowboy State Politics, you are more than welcome.
And I will gladly come on yours. It'd be nice. You poke a lot of fingers at the Freedom Caucus. Give us a shot to build a coalition. Seriously.
Yeah. No, I'm totally down for the conversation. How we come to an agreement is through discussion. And again, it goes back to this whole thing of compromise and coalition building and all that. So I mentioned before the break and before we got on this latest tangent that there's a couple of pretty disturbing things that are happening in our world. And it is a direct result of what the Democrats have done. Let me listen to this one. So I think I got this from, Daily Wire or something. Anyway, Generation Z is addicted to skipping work. Listen, this one ought to make your eyes pop out. 34% surveyed said that they have accepted a job but never showed up. Listen to that, right? Let me read that again. 34% of those surveyed with Generation Z say they accepted a job and never showed up. And let me just read you the first opening paragraphs here. Generation Z is seriously lacking in career ambition, according to a 2025 study related to job applications and employment. The study compared the employment choices of different generations and found some disturbing trends among those born between 1997 and 2012. Typically referred to as Generation Z. Quote, is it any wonder that ambition is falling? Young people are disengaged and feeling abandoned. The job habits, career aspirations, and willingness to work remotely were analyzed for 1,000 workers in Britain, and analysts found that across the board, 53% of respondents would choose to work remotely, even if it meant they had no chance of being promoted. Another 51% said that they would take a pay cut if they were allowed to work from home as much as they wanted. Over 1/3 of Generation Z respondents said that they have participated in the trend known as career catfishing. This entails accepting a job offer from an employer, but then never showing up to work on the first day or at all. The 34% of Generation Z who said they have done this was almost double the overall average of workers who had not participated in the trend, which stood at 18%. Now, just think about that for a second. An entire generation of folks, 34% of an entire generation, say that they'll tell an employer, yeah, I'll come to work. Yeah, that number sounds pretty good to me. And then they just don't show up. Or they don't want to go into work. They just want to work from their sofa in their underwear and attend an occasional meeting without pants on. I mean, that's what that amounts to. And if you wonder why our innovation in America and America was the nexus of everything awesome that was created. When computers came on, it was Silicon Valley. It was America. All of the greatest medical advancements, I shouldn't say all, but most of the greatest medical advancements happened right here. And that comes from initiative. It comes from curiosity. It comes from, the drive to succeed. But what the Democrat Party has been able to do is eliminate that drive in a whole couple, several different generations. And unfortunately, from my perspective, I think it started during COVID when we're handing out checks and, people were sitting at home for months on end, not having to work. And then you add on top of it the thought process, the thinking of the left that, hey, you don't have to succeed. You don't have to do anything. It's all the government that's going to do everything for you.
My grandparents, I lived with my grandparents from the time I was 13, 14, 15, quite a bit. And they came out of the Depression era. And my grandmother was always talking about, you kids these days, you think from the time you get started, you got to have everything.
Yeah, cradle to grave government.
Yeah, and she's, when my kitchen was a peach crate and a Hoosier later, that was really something when she got that.
Oh, yeah.
And, she's right. When couples get married now, if they don't have the big house, 2 cars, all the other doodads that go with it, there's no starting out from scratch.
No.
And I think that's part of it is they don't really understand what things are worth. We've had things so easy for so long. I hope that I'm wrong, but eventually I think they're going to get a chance to figure out.
Well, yeah, and I think so. I think that the average business person has probably gone bankrupt at least a couple of times. And everybody gets on Donald Trump. Oh, he went bankrupt so many times. Well, he's not bankrupt anymore. And the truth is, the only way that you're going to succeed is if you take chances, is that you take a chance and that you fail. I tell, anytime I get a chance to talk to young people, I tell them, you don't learn anything from winning. Yeah, but you do learn that winning is kind of fun and that you can celebrate, but really it doesn't teach you anything. What it teaches you is what you did was good enough to win. That's all that it teaches you. Now, what you learn from losing and from failing is a whole bunch of you learn a whole bunch of ways that things don't work, and that it forces you to come up with, it didn't work this way, so let me try it this way. It's what was it? Was it Thomas Edison? He said, I didn't succeed. I found 5,000 ways not to make a light bulb. And that is absolutely true. And, I find studies like this to be really, really, really frightening. These are the folks that are going to be allegedly running our country. And, it really scares the crap out of me.
I bumped into a friend of mine. His son owns Blacktooth Brewing. They've done tremendously. They've got 4 different locations now. The one in Laramie
big time now.
Just taken off. Yeah, really gone well. And I said to him, I've always believed that I know how to make a small fortune. And his eyes kind of lit up a little bit. And I said, yeah, you let me start with a large fortune.
And I'll turn it into a small fortune. It's absolutely true. Well, when we come back tomorrow, by the way, I should probably give you a heads up on what's coming on the program. We've got a lot of interviews that are set up that we're just waiting. Well, actually, I'm going to do one right after we finish up the broadcast today. So a lot of new voices. We're going to have some changes made to the program. And I think, Agent 29, sometimes you just have to start things and, jump right in the middle of it. So I think, what do you think about next Monday? We switch to a 2-hour format.
How about Tuesday?
Tuesday. Yeah, I'm sorry. We don't work on Monday. So Tuesday, we'll begin our 2-hour format. Scares the crap out of me, but there'll be plenty more Cowboy state politics. Don't forget, you can listen to the show every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. right here on Facebook, YouTube, and on X. So from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow.